Started here. This is Albert Lee, running for Congress here in the 3rd District. I'm joined with Tomas Ramos out of New York, Salman Rajput out of Michigan, Ted Terry in Georgia, and we've got a moderator, Akshita Verma from Solomon's campaign. But how you guys doing?
We're doing good.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, given the circumstances and everything, right, with COVID-19, I'm sure all of you would rather be out knocking on doors and talking to folks and meeting constituents, right?
100%.
Yeah. So I guess we're gonna wait a couple minutes here as we get to the various streams. This is our first virtual live stream coast to coast with candidates from around the country. And what we're doing is we're trying to stream on a couple of different social media platforms. I know we're trying to do Facebook, Twitter, as well as YouTube, and then on the various candidate Twitter pages as well. So hopefully you're able to join in one form or another, and then we're going to try to go ahead and get a recording of this posted for other platforms like Instagram for the future. But yeah, so we are coming to you live from across the country, really on all 4 corners, really. We're just missing the Southwest at this point. But yeah, so, I know Tomas, we met back in November at the brand new Congress shindig, but I haven't had an opportunity to meet Solomon or Ted. How are you guys doing?
Very good. It's very nice to meet you, Albert.
And tell us a little bit more about what's going on. I mean, how's everything going with COVID-19 down there in Georgia?
Well, we had the sad situation of getting national news because our governor didn't, articulate the reality of coronavirus being spread by people who are asymptomatic. Mm-hmm. And so that came as quite a shock to a lot of people because for weeks, local leaders were saying that we need to do more. And so unfortunately, we're just a little behind the curve, and I think people are going to be impacted by it.
As I understand it, there's like 8 Republican governors around the country that still haven't put in shelter-in-place orders, saying that it is not affecting their areas. And I understand our president is kind of siding with these 8 Republican governors and saying it's a call for the governors. What is it like? I mean, over in Michigan there, Salman? Can you hear me?
Not the best. It certainly could. Sorry, are you guys able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. It definitely could be better over here in Michigan. So we have one of the largest number of cases of coronavirus in the country now. And unfortunately, as was predicted by many people, African Americans in our state have been hit disproportionately. So, they make up about 14% of the state's population, but have made up about 40% of the cases so far. So the pandemic is certainly revealing how marginalized communities, people who have historically vulnerable in America, are getting hit the hardest because of the lack of healthcare access that they have. Them are not able to take time off from work, unfortunately, in our state. So, yeah. So that is kind of where we're at now.
That is incredibly unfortunate, and I know that kind of highlights some of the impacts that we see with structural and systemic racism. I mean, when we talk about Michigan, we talk about the water crisis in Flint, and this is just another highlight of those things. And I think that demonstrates that we do need to look at representation and diversify our representation, get folks that are coming from areas understanding and knowing the struggle and the situation that's on the ground. But before we go any further, I understand that Akshita I want to introduce everybody to Akshita. She's our moderator for today, for this hour. She's part of Salman Rajput's campaign. And you are going to go ahead and give us a brief overview as to what's going on for our event today.
Yeah, hi guys, my name's Akshita. I am the campaign manager for Salman, and today I'm here in this town hall and the role as a moderator. So our event today is really going to concentrate on creating a people's bailout instead of just bailing out the corporations again, like our last crisis in 2008, where, you know, we saw that there was a huge recession and working class Americans across the country were really struggling, you know, with same issues as today: rent, mortgage, healthcare, all these issues. And, you know, our government chose again to really prioritize the needs of billionaires and corporations and not really help the people who are struggling. So this time around, when we have a pandemic, and this pandemic is really shining a light on the inequalities we already have in our healthcare system, in our housing, in just the incredible wealth gap we have in this country, we are urging everyone to organize around asking for a people's bailout. So bail out the people, not the corporations. You know, freeze rent, freeze utility, freeze mortgage, you know, freeze student loan payments. Make sure the working class Americans, when we come out of this crisis, aren't in thousands of dollars of debt, because that's what causes small businesses to close. That's what causes our economy to crash. Like, the stock market might be crashing, but that's not a reflection of what is really happening with working class Americans. So this town hall, you know, we have progressives across the country who are really prioritizing working class Americans. You know, we're running for Congress, we're running for a commission, like we're running for all these positions across the country, and we're advocating for the people in our communities. So that's really what this town hall is going to talk about. We have Salman Rajput, who is running for Congress in Michigan, District 12. He's a 27-year-old medical student who's taking a leave to run because he's tired of, you know, our politicians to actually act on these urgent issues. We have Tomas Ramos in New York, District 5. He's running for US Congress as well. And Albert Lee, who's running in Oregon, and Ted Terry, who's running in Georgia. So, you know, we have these progressives who are championing working class Americans all across the country. And today we're going to gather to talk about how we're going to organize around COVID-19 and help working class Americans.
Great. Well, thanks, Akshita. I guess we should go around the horn and just give a brief introduction of who we are and why we're here. Solomon, you want to start off?
Yeah, for sure. So thank you guys for having us on this town hall. We really appreciate being able to talk to everyone right now about what we need to get done in this country for coronavirus. So, as Akshita mentioned, my name is Salman Rajput. I'm a 27-year-old medical student, and I'm taking a leave of absence to run for Congress of the United States. And when I tell people that I'm a medical student and I'm taking leave to run, everyone always gets confused. They're like, how does a medical student decide to end up running for Congress? And to be fair, it's a great question because you don't see it every day. So when I was younger, I was really passionate about politics because I was taking a look at our messed up status quo, and I was thinking, you know what, it'd be really cool to try to do something about these problems. The same thing, it's all the same things that we've got going on right now, right? Like the cost of healthcare in our country, climate change, the college education, how expensive it is. So I was thinking, you know what, maybe I'll get involved in politics. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, oh, wait, actually, we can't count on the government to get anything done. They will never do anything because they're just bought and sold by big corporations. And I said, well, there's no way in heck that I want to sign up to be a corporate shill. Like, I can't do that. I'm sorry. So I guess I'll have to do something else. And I ended up in medical school because it's a way to help people when they're going through a tough spot. And I was thinking maybe we can change our healthcare system from the inside out. But now times are changing, and we're having a new generation of leaders like the on the corporate interests, and we're going to go out there and unapologetically champion what the people in this country need. And so that really inspired me to think about running. And ultimately, I decided to run because the establishment has totally failed us. All they know how to do is to think small. But it's that same small thinking that's gotten us into this mess in the first place. I think by now it's clear to everyone that we can't just keep putting band-aids on our broken systems and expecting things to change. We need to go out there and fight unapologetically for the big, bold structural policies that will address our issues at a fundamental level. So we begged and pleaded with our politicians for a long time to go out there and fight for these big issues, but they've ignored us time and time again. And after a while, we have to realize that we can only beg for so long before it's clear they're never going to and fight for what we need to get done in this country. They're never going to change. So if we want to get this stuff done, we got to go do it ourselves, because at this point, we're done waiting. I'm excited to join this race, and that's why I'm on this panel with you guys right now. So thank you guys again, and I'm looking forward to this discussion in the next 2 hours.
Thank you, Solomon. Tomas?
Hey, y'all. A pleasure to meet you, Ted and Solomon. Albert and I met each other last year. And what's very ironic is that we have mutual friends that have known each other for
years.
Like crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is great. Obviously, we've all had to change our strategy on how we're going to get our message across. This is a great platform to do so. So my name is Tomas Ramos. I always say my story was written before I was even born. I was born in Washington Heights, New York. If you all ever been in New York City, Washington Heights is Little Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. That's where all the Dominicans live. So when a child is born in my community, they're already born at a deficit. They're born into poverty with no real way out of the vicious cycle of poverty. When I was 1 year old, my father was taken away. He did 12 years in federal prison. He was a drug dealer. My mother raised myself, single mother, 4 children. And she moved us out of Washington Heights when I was 5 because she knew the cycle would repeat itself if we did not move, because there was no educational structures in place. When we talk about systemic racism, it was very live and well. And the cycle would have repeated itself with myself. So we were able to move to Philadelphia, then to Dominican Republic upon my father's release because he was deported. Then I came back to finish college, and I've been on my own since I was 16. I studied finance and went to Temple University. And instead of going to Wall Street, I chose to come back to my community to bridge the gap of poverty to prosperity through education. You know, when we look at our criminal justice system, the school to prison pipeline, it's still extremely relevant right now. I can identify young people right now that I look at them, I'm like, they're being raised by a single mother that's working 2 jobs. They're being raised without a father because their father's incarcerated, dead, or just absentee. So that child will most likely end up in the prison system because of systemic racism. We don't have the resources, the necessary resources to break that cycle. We don't have the right people that have lived the realities that I live in my community every day. So when I decided to run for Congress, it was more so we need one of us in Washington, D.C. You know, I'm not a politician at all. You know, I was working as a director in a community center in the housing projects. I chose to work in the housing projects. Why? Because my community deserves somebody that knows what they're going through and actually cares about their needs. So that's why I chose to do that work. Once I started seeing all the red tape and how our politicians don't care about our communities and how they're bought out by special interests, I had to do something, you know. And now I'm here running for Congress in New York 15 in the Bronx. We're one of the poorest congressional districts in the country, but we have so much culture, we have so much livelihood, we have so much amazing, brilliant people, and they just deserve a better leader that's actually going to do the right things that are necessary, and someone that understands what our families are going through every single day. So that's who I am, and I'm running to just break the vicious cycle of systemic racism that has been oppressing our communities for so long.
Well said, Tomas. Well said. I mean, and that's kind of what we're talking about right here, right now. We have this amazing, incredible crisis that's going on. And what do our members of Congress do? They give another bit of money, what, $500 billion to corporations. We've given $3-4 trillion to Wall Street without discussion, without deliberation. But when it's time to actually start bailing out the people, we got to talk about it. We got to figure it out. And then the results are something like a $1,200 check, maybe at some point in May. This is because the people that are in the halls of Congress right now are part of the 1%. The vast majority of them do not understand how we live, how we feel, what our struggles are. And we need to get more regular, everyday folks into office so that we can actually have a government that's going to work for all of us. But I want to go ahead and move on over to Ted Terry. Ted, can you jump in and tell us about yourself?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Albert, and great to meet Solomon and Tomas. Really honored to be on this panel tonight, in a company of great leaders, great young leaders who are trying to make change at the federal level. So I want all my supporters, if they're watching, listening, and as we're sharing this out, to please support these great leaders, progressive leaders running for Congress. I'm not running for Congress. I'm running at a local level in DeKalb County here in Georgia, which is the second largest county in Georgia, the most Democratic county in Georgia. So a real opportunity to move forward. A lot of the things that we're trying to make change at the federal level, we want to see changes happen up and down the ballot. And so, this year has so many opportunities for us to elect new members of Congress, new senators, change the White House, obviously, but also to the local House, state Senate, state House, and even down to the county commission and sometimes school board level. These are opportunities for us to make change. And so I'm running on my record as mayor of Clarkston, Georgia. Was finished up as mayor the last 6.5 years. We were known as the most ethnically diverse square mile in America. We've been welcoming refugees for over 40 plus years. And we're a city that leads with compassion, leads with a spirit of inclusion and welcoming to all. We also were the first city in Georgia to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour for our city employees. We were the first to have Election Day as a city holiday. And we were the first city to decriminalize marijuana possession. And this was all back in 2016. And so we've tried to take the leadership that we can do in our sort of small town, lead by example. And the great thing about that is that it's helped influence other cities and other communities around Georgia, around the Deep South, really building this groundswell of progressive policies that work. And when we talk about running on a Green New Deal, I'm running for this county commission seat here in DeKalb County, and I'm running on a DeKalb Green New Deal because, quite frankly, there's a lot that has to go into the federal legislation to get that passed and to get all that worked out. But we need to see that change at the bottom at the same time. So we got to either meet in the middle or just build it so strong at the bottom that it bubbles up to the top. And so I'm running on that a Green New Deal. I'm running on public financing of local elections. I'm running on a housing justice strategy. And the last thing I'll just say in my introduction is, talking about the rent being too high and the mortgage being too high, especially right now as people are just, not losing their incomes and not even getting those $1,200 checks, maybe, months from now, that rent stability, that housing stability is so crucial. And I think this is why the people's bailout to me is so important, because this is an effort to stabilize people, because if people lose their homes, if they become housing insecure, it destabilizes so many other pillars that hold our society together. And when we talk about, housing security, we're talking about, children's security and then children's health. And we're talking about public health. We're talking about a whole host of things that really go into, what we want to do. And that's in this pandemic. We want to end the spread, and we can't have people worrying about whether they're going to, go into a lot of debt, at the end of this crisis, potentially be evicted. That's the big concern here in Metro Atlanta is, are the apartments, are they going to put people on a list that aren't paying right now and try to push them out when this crisis is over? And, this people's bailout is an opportunity for us to really help stabilize people. So again, thanks everyone for very great to meet y'all, and looking forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ted. I mean, seriously, what you're doing is exactly what we need everybody to do. We need to have folks running for office on all levels of government here, because it's not just at the federal level where we have this cadre of millionaires, these 1%ers that are ruling over us. We really need to replace them with citizen representatives on all levels. And quite frankly, there is so much that is done on the lower levels of government that affect us on a grander scale. So I applaud you for your run as well. My name is Albert Lee. I'm running for the 3rd District of Oregon to Congress. I want to represent the people. I believe that, first of all, democracy requires choice. It's something we haven't had in our district in over a generation. And I know, there's so many people out there right now that want to have Bernie get out of the race right now. Hell, we've got half the states that haven't voted yet. And as far as I understand, we still live in a democracy. So I do hope that he stays in. And the second thing I'm going to say about that is that we have been getting a lot of gaslighting from mainstream media, as well as from the establishment, when it comes to saying that Bernie can't win. Because the fact of the matter is, we have more than half of the states that haven't voted. And when it comes down to the total count, they're pretty much neck and neck. So I'm going to move off of that and go back to talking about why I'm running. So here in our district, we have faced a series of crises, including a homelessness crisis, the lack of affordable housing and living wages, and a climate emergency that has only gotten lip service. What we have here is one of the most progressive districts in the entire country, and we are led by someone that's sort of a middle of the road Democrat. Now, generally speaking, he votes the right way, but when he talks about all of these progressive actions and moves that we need to do, but there in turn does not come the action that we need afterwards. So for instance, we have a climate change champ who claims to have written the Green New Deal, who owns millions of dollars in fossil fuel stocks. You can't, be a champion of the planet at the same time being for making money off of extractive resources. We have a social justice champ who voted for the defense of marriage, who voted for Sesta Fosta, but says, yeah, maybe those were bad votes. We have someone who says that he wants to overturn Citizens United, wants to have publicly financed campaigns so that we can actually diversify our leadership. Yet 65% of his contributions have come from corporations. And then if you add on PACs, 95% of his funds have come from PACs and corporations. Right now, he's outraised us 10-1, but if you take away the PAC money, if you take away the corporate contributions, we've raised the same amount of money, which I think is quite impressive for a first-time candidate. Now, my background, I'm a sixth-generation American and an immigrant at the same time. I was born in South Korea, where my African-American Army dad met my Korean mom during the Vietnam War. I grew up in working-class St. Louis, next door to Ferguson. I'm a first-generation college grad, a first-generation law school grad. I served in the United States Army myself. Now, in addition to that, I've worked in international trade, owned my own business, worked in law, and most recently, I was one of the deans at Portland Community College. I stepped down from that position in order to make this run for the people, because I think that is beyond time that we have representatives that are going to actually work and fight for the people, as opposed to taking the corporate contributions. We need people who know the struggle. I mean, that's what we're talking about in Michigan, in New York, in Georgia, the effects that are going on. We need people who know the struggle, who won't take those corporate contributions and are going to truly represent and fight for the people. Because what I see today when it comes to this package that has been given out by our Congress is a repetition of 2008, only magnitudes larger. With the financial bailout, Wall Street got bailed out. Main Street did not. People got stuck holding the bag when it came to the mortgages. Regular everyday Americans struggled. They went bankrupt. They were foreclosed on, while the fat cats on Wall Street, the automotive industry, they all got to wipe away the risk that they took. They got to get bailed out by the government. We need a government that's going to bail out the people. We need a government that's going to bail us out and not those that don't need it. So, the last 3 weeks, we've watched as trillions of dollars have been poured in order to protect the assets of those at the very top. While the rest of us, we're losing our jobs, we're losing our housing, we're losing our stability, and we need the protection of a Medicare for all system that's going to help fight this pandemic. So that's what we're talking about today. Let's get into it. I mean, I'm fired up. I don't know about all you.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. So we're just gonna, now that everyone's been introduced, we can start with some questions for all the candidates. So Progressives from Congress asked on Instagram, specifically how the Native American community is being impacted by COVID-19 and this crisis, and how we as progressives can help this community at this time. How should the stimulus bill include them? What can we do? What action steps can we take to help the Native American community?
Well, I'll jump in. I mean, when it comes to the people that get the short end of the stick, it's our BIPOC community. It's our Black and our Indigenous people of color always get the short end of the stick, right? Right now, what we have is underfunding of all tribal organizations as it is right now. They do not get the same attention and care. They do not get the same attention in social services and the like. And we need to do everything we can to look at those that are impacted greatest first. So I would say that we need to focus on our indigenous communities. We need to focus on our Black communities. Like Solomon said, you know, when 40% of your COVID crisis patients are coming out of a community that's only 14% of your state, something's wrong with that situation. We need to do everything we can. Now, as far as specifics, does anybody have any ideas on what specifics that we can look at for the indigenous communities?
Yeah, I can jump in for that. So so in our medical training, we learn about the health disparities between different populations, and of course, the indigenous population always comes up because of systemic racism in our country. They struggle with higher rates of mental illness and substance abuse. And I think that right now we're seeing the cracks in our society get even larger because of the pandemic. And we need to make sure that we have a healthcare system that everyone can take advantage of in our country, like every other developed country that exists. And that's just like Albert Schweitzer says, healthcare is a human right. And what does it mean to say healthcare is a human right? It's just a fancy way of saying, if you're sick in this country, you should be able to see a doctor. If you're sick in this country, you should be able to get your medicine. How many people are uninsured in every other developed country? The answer is 0. How many people is it in the United States of America? It's tens of millions of people. Why do we act like this? So many people in our country are saying, I thought we were a first world country. I thought we were a developed nation. When we're not having enough ventilators, when we can't even produce enough masks. The concern extends past this pandemic. I thought we were a first world country. Why is it that we can't provide healthcare for all people right now? And I think some centrists and some moderate Democrats are saying, in this crisis, we need to act swiftly. And we should say that, you know, it shouldn't, like right now, testing should be free. Right now, all treatment for corona should be free. First of all, I would love to see that. But secondly, why is it that coronavirus as a disease is so different than every other disease? Okay, if you get coronavirus, we should aim for that to be free. But if you have cancer, you have to pay for it yourself. Does that make any sense to anybody? So I think making sure that every single person in this country gets the right that they deserve around healthcare would help the indigenous population as well as all other populations in this country.
Yeah, I think you hit a nail on the head. I mean, that's kind of it. This crisis is demonstrating that our employee-based private health insurance regime is failing. This is one of the big struggles that happens when you have millions of people that lose their jobs. They lose their health insurance. Now, there are plenty of other people that just haven't had health insurance. We're talking about marginalized communities. And again, when we talk about marginalized communities, it generally means Black. It generally means indigenous folks. If we had a universal single payer Medicare for all system, that's going to cover those folks. That's going to cover the houseless communities that we have. Here on the coast, we have major houseless communities that feel larger impacts when it comes to mental health issues, when it comes to drug dependency issues. These things can be cured. They're curable issues, but we neglect to do so because we say, you've got to pay somebody. We want to make sure that somebody can make a profit off of your sickness. That doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think it makes sense to anybody else on this planet.
And I was just going to add on. So last night, there was an article that came out. Bronx residents twice as likely to die from COVID-19 in New York City. Twice. So my congressional district is 98% people of color. So you're telling me 98% of people are twice as likely to die than the rest of New York City. You know, and there's different factors in it. We are the unhealthiest. We have the highest asthma rate, highest diabetes rate. So
let me ask you about that highest asthma rate. I mean,
yes.
A lot of that comes from environmental issues. Environmental racism increases your chances of having asthma. But I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
Well, to your point, when children are born, we have the highest rate of children that have asthma. So to your point, yes, it is an environmental issue, and it's directly impacting our communities of color. So we have to take a holistic approach to all of this, because yes, Medicare for all, but we also have to tackle and combat our environmental issues that are really going on in our low-income communities of color. We have the largest concentration of we have the most public housing complexes in my congressional district. So factor all that in, 7-8 people living in one household. So one person gets infected, they're bringing that back home, infecting their entire family. Then access to healthcare. It's just so many different factors, and we have to really take a holistic approach at it and I always look at it from the ground up. Our children, if our children are being born and they already have asthma, that's a problem. So how are we going to address those issues?
Yeah, no, I mean, when we talk about a progressive platform, we're talking about a platform that's going to take care of all of us, right? Not just the wealthy few. When we have a progressive platform that has things like a universal Medicare for all system, that has a Green New Deal, we're trying to take care of a bunch of different problems, a bunch of different societal problems at the same time. And I think that they're all interrelated, right? The case in point when it comes to the asthma, you have higher points of asthma in places that are dirtier. Places that are dirtier tend to be places that are left to marginalized folks. We need to wrap around and take care of all of these different issues. And here's the thing, even if you're someone that isn't impacted by these issues, you actually are, because when it all hits the fan, something's got to give. People still are going to need to be taken care of one way or another. And regardless if there's a social safety net or not, you're going to have the negative externalities and increased issues when it comes to crime, when it comes to increased issues when it comes to health issues, all the destabilization that comes around, all of these things that cost those folks that aren't impacted as well. So it just makes sense that you want to take care of the entire community to build a stronger community in total, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing is I always look at education as a true equalizer. A lot of our communities are not educated about these, like the Green New Deal, for example. It's extremely important that we really start having that conversations on how we have to get it passed now. We got to get all of our community engaged and involved. But how can we get them engaged and involved when, one, they're worrying how they're going to pay rent, they're worrying how they're going to bring food to your table. And I'm telling you, when I go knock on the door, people are disengaged because they go like, I don't care. The government hasn't done anything for us. They failed us. What are you going to do differently? So it's just already working at a deficit to try to change our community's mind that has been disenfranchised for so long. But the only way we're going to do it is if we get everybody together. So it has to be, collectively, and we have to start educating and engaging in the grassroots level. That's the only way we're really going to make this change happen in the grassroots level and educating people out their doors.
Right. Moderator, you're going to keep us going?
Yeah, let's keep going. So a lot of people are asking questions about the stimulus package for COVID-19 that was just passed. The good things in it, the bad things in it, and whether you guys, if you guys were in Congress right now, how you would have voted on it. So if anyone wants to talk about the good things that were in it and then the bad things that were in it and how you personally would have voted, we can start there. Solomon, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to start. So something that I'm very concerned about in this moment in our country is what's going to happen when coronavirus is over and everyone has to pay back their rent. So here's the situation, right? We have a national moratorium on evictions for all mortgages that are backed by federal lenders. So many people cannot be evicted right now in our country, but have to stop paying rent. They have to still continue to pay rent, and sure, they might not be able to be evicted for a couple months, but when what is going to happen, or are they immediately going to get evicted, like we were talking about before? So I think that although I appreciate some elements of the bill, something that it absolutely needs to address is the fact that we need to suspend all rent, mortgage, and utility payments in this country during the duration of the coronavirus pandemic, because how is anyone expected to be able to pay rent when so many people in this country are being laid off or being not able to work any hours? They have no income. Where are they going to be able to get this money from to pay 4 months of rent when people right now are living, so many people in this country right now are living paycheck to paycheck. And as we all know, about 40% of the country can't even afford an unexpected $400 expense. So that's something that our campaign is really focused on right now, is the injustice around housing. which is why we're supporting a movement called Rent Strike 2020 that has really flourished in the past few weeks. So we, this organization created petitions for every state and territory in the union, calling for the suspension of all rent, mortgage, and utility payments during the duration of the coronavirus pandemic. These petitions have exploded across the country, garnered around 2 million signatures in my or nationally. In my state, about 200 signatures. To put in perspective, you only need 100,000 signatures in order to get a response from the White House. So this is something that many, many people care about because it's affecting all of us across the country to some degree, most people at least in this country. So that's something that we're trying to champion, I think, the opposite of the current bill.
I'll jump in real quick. If for another month with small businesses being closed, it's estimated in my community, 60% of those small businesses will not be able to reopen. What does that mean? That's 60% is a lot of jobs that will be that we won't be able to recover from. So I know the stimulus package had some things with small business owners, but it's not enough. Small interest loans, grants. It's going to take a lot more to really get our small businesses, going again. But it's a scary thing to think about. More than half of the job market in my district will be completely just vanished. And what does that look like? And what are we going to do to get people working again to stimulate, our economy? So that's something that I'm really scared of, and seeing what I can do in my capacity as an advocate to make sure that we can support our small business owners more, because that is a staple of our community. We're an immigrant community. We have bodegas, we have restaurants, we have little mom and pop shops. These are people's life savings that they poured into these small businesses, and they will not be able to recover. So that's something that Congress really, really needs to start looking at.
Yeah, I mean, Tomas, you've got a service industry background, don't you?
Yeah. I worked hospitality, bartended, managed restaurants for over 8 years. So yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's the same thing here. We've got restaurants that are boarded up, and you're right. Another month or two, they won't be able to recover. And here's the thing, when we talk about the stimulus that was pushed through by our members of Congress, I would have voted against it. Quite frankly, I would have voted against it because it was focused on corporations. It was focused on these organizations that have built-in business continuity, that have the insurance that is necessary to recover. I would have pushed for more of a focus on small businesses, and definitely focus on the people, because like Salman pointed out, 40% of us can't cover $400. And we're right now at one of the highest levels of unemployment. We've got oh, I've got feedback. Somebody on. It's not me. Hold on. No, it's not me. Okay, but I'm losing my train of thought here. But I think it's you, Tomas. Okay, there you go. Thanks. So I would focus on small businesses. I would focus on bailing out the people. Here's the thing: we right now have given trillions of dollars away to those at the very top, who are only going to do it to protect our assets. We need to focus on things that are going to help people get through this crisis. Now, here's the other thing. The other thing we should have been focusing on is a universal single-payer Medicare for all plan now. I mean, this pandemic is a demonstration as to why we need this. If we don't make sure to cover and take care of everybody, we will not get through this pandemic. And here in our community, we have a tremendous houseless community that is going to be impacted by this crisis. They're going to need the care, and if we don't take care of them, it's going to continue to spread. We need to do everything we can to flatten the curve, to end this crisis, and to make sure that subsequent crises do not occur, and that we have capabilities of taking care of that. So yeah, I mean, I would call out all of those members of Congress who have pushed in things that are going to be for the benefit of themselves and for their wealthy patrons who continue to give them millions of dollars, and focus on the people that are hurting, which is all of our communities. I mean, where it is at Georgia or New York or Oregon, Michigan, we're all feeling the same things. We've got people that are struggling, worried about how they're going to feed their families. And the other day, one of the candidates up in Washington called it out pretty plainly. He was like, we're all about capitalism until there's a crisis, and then we need socialism to bail it out. And here's the thing, that's kind of the thing right now. We've got socialism for the wealthy, but we're not having socialism for the people. We need to take what we can to ensure that people can get through this crisis. So again, I would have focused on bailing out the people, bailing out small business. Yes.
Yeah. So can we just talk about how little $1,200 is? Like one-time payment of $1,200. It's just blowing my mind, because we know this coronavirus situation, it's not going to be like just 2 more weeks. Like we know that it's going to get worse and worse and worse. The country, even Donald Trump has recognized that we need to keep these shelter-in-place orders, the social distancing orders.
Easter, right?
It's not going to stop at Easter, so it needs to be like, it's going to go at least through the end of April. We're expecting the peak of the cases to be weeks and weeks from now. People will not be able to go back to work. What is $1,200 going to get you in a crisis that's going to last for months? It's going to pay for
my rent,
maybe
a month.
No, yeah, for many people, it's not even going to pay rent for a month, especially if you're living in an expensive urban area. And, the thing is, we have more to pay for than just rent. We've got groceries, we've got utilities, we've got to pay for insurance. I mean, in our broken private health insurance system, people still have to pay their premiums every single month. They need to pay for cable, they need to pay for cell phone bills. Like, there's so many expenses, they're not stopping. $1,200 one time is like, it's almost insulting. It's just such
that's what Bernie was saying.
It's when, like you said, we might get it sometime in May. Like, I certainly have not gotten it. I'm sure you guys haven't gotten it either. When are we getting it? And like, by the time we get it, we're going to need more, like way more. So this is just like ridiculous.
Well, I think Bernie put it down bluntly. We need an emergency economic support of $2,000 per person per month until at least a year after the crisis is over. Even at the worst, Canada has yielded $2,000 a month per person for 4 months. I mean, and other places, Denmark, they're doing 80% of your salary going forward. We just need to, pull our heads out and really focus on bailing out the people.
Yeah,
and I'll add to that, Albert. It's interesting. This is where kind of like the sort of the modern Republican kind of party, is right now. It's not that they're against big government. They're just against, quote unquote, big government that they can't control. Because, when you have the system where lobbyists and special interests write the laws, they can manipulate them. They can take advantage of the funding streams. And so, why are they trying to give all this money through, whether it was originally the slush fund they were calling it, or to the Small Business Administration, is they know that there's some people out there who absolutely know how to tap into those channels, and they'll be fine. Now, here in Clarkston, I'll just tell a personal story. We've got, what I like to brag is the best Himalayan restaurant in Georgia, Kathmandu Kitchen. And it's run by a former Bhutanese refugee. He's a good friend of mine, Arjun. And he is, English is his second language. He's a new American, restaurateur. He's a really great restaurateur, but navigating the bureaucracy of the SBA and all of the things you have to know. It's almost like you have to hire someone.
You got to hire a lawyer.
Figure out how to navigate this. And guess what? The people who have power in this country have the money to hire the people who know how to navigate it. They wrote the laws. So this is the other issue, I think, to emphasize what Bernie was putting out, is giving the money to the people immediately means that the economy will continue to function. And so the landlords will get their rent, right? The landlords continue to pay their people. People who have extra money, maybe they're buying more takeout food, all right? So now the restaurants are supporting. And so this is why, like, the channel, you can't manipulate the channel of giving the people back the money. You can manipulate it when you have it through all these other, through all these applications, programs and stuff that have to be worked out and figured out through the bureaucracy.
And
Absolutely.
Also, I had a conversation earlier today. This pandemic, this crisis has literally just exposed all of our weaknesses. It's a lot of weaknesses we have. You know, right now, New York's most schools are closed. Our schools is completely shut down. So they're taking the internet tech approach to how they're going to teach. But let me tell you, most of my kids don't have computers. A lot of my kids don't have access to broadband. So how we're going to educate our young people mobile if they don't even have the access to those resources at their fingertips, you know? So that's another discussion we really need to start talking about is universal broadband, you know? Another piece is universal basic income. I am for it, you know, and I'm a big tech person. I love technology, and Andrew Yang brought it to the forefront. And this is a prime example of what we need to really start aggressively talking about UBI. What does that look like even after this pandemic? Because I believe, yeah, up to a year, if not more, but we have to really talk about UBI for the future and the long term. But this is really just exposing all of our weaknesses, and we can actually do it right now. You know, now we're at a place like, you know what, our economy's coming down a bit, small businesses are hurting, but we all can actually collectively get together and start figuring out real solutions for the future and stop just bullshitting, you know? So that's one thing that I always talk about. I'm hoping a lot more people start getting engaged. There's so many more people that are losing their jobs. So people that normally don't vote, I hope they're watching and seeing, wow, we need to get engaged because this is our future and our livelihood at hand, you know?
No, you're right when you say that a lot of things are being exposed. I mean, one of the things when it comes to our schools being shut down is that the majority of a vast majority of kids get their meals through our public school system. That right there is a disgrace because it is showing that we do not have a social safety net that is taking care of people's needs, number one. Number two, it demonstrates that we do not have a living wage so that people can actually take care of their kids and take care of feeding their kids. You know, we've had 40 years of a minimum wage that has remained stagnant. In fact, has decreased in its value while our productivity has gone through the roof. That means that there has been a shift, a concentration of profit that has been concentrated into the hands of the very few, creating a very huge underclass of people. Now, you know, when we just look at our minimum wage from the 1970s and just peg it to inflation, it should be $33 an hour today, $33 an hour. Now here in Portland, in the Portland metropolitan area, economists tell you gotta, and if you want to work one 40-hour job and take care of your family, you need to make at least $28 an hour. So 33, 28, that's about right. Here in progressive Portland, our minimum wage is $12.25 an hour. That's better than most places. National average, or the national minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, right? When I got my first W-2 job in 1990, I worked for Church's Fried Chicken in St. Louis, and I made $3.80 an hour. Now, that was the minimum wage then. And people were like, oh, well, man, that's low. Peg that $3.80 an hour, 1990s dollars, and put it into 2019 dollars. 2019 dollars, that $3.80 is worth $13.10 an hour. So in fact, I made more on my first job in minimum wage than people do today here in Portland, and almost twice as much as the national minimum wage. That is a disgrace. People can't live off of that. And then when you talk about things like the broadband, yes, broadband should be a free public utility. We shouldn't have it carved out where we have all of these different companies basically carving out little monopoly territories and turf and jacking up prices so that they can make a profit on it. This is the utility of today and of the future. You know, and we need to make sure that we have rural broadband. You know, a vast majority of my state is rural, and in some places you can't get but dial-up or satellite internet because there's just not an infrastructure built in. We need to get a smart grid built in. We need to rebuild a high-speed electric rail system, and we need to rethink all of our systems and then interconnect those things with a broadband that's infrastructure that's going to create jobs, first of all, right? Jobs you cannot export. That's going to help to revitalize communities in a wide variety of different areas, and it's going to rebuild our infrastructure, reinvest in America. You know, if you want to, instead of giving handouts to a bunch of corporations so that their CEOs can make sure that their stock options are all good, that's one thing. I'm telling you, we need to reinvest in America. We need to rebuild our infrastructure. We need to rebuild our education, and we need to rebuild our social safety nets so that we don't have people struggling.
Absolutely. Well said, Albert.
Yeah, definitely well said. Absolutely, this pandemic is really shining a light on all of the existing problems we have in our highly, late stage capitalist society. I do want to use this opportunity to plug a few different things for our candidates who are speaking today. So, during this time, everybody, especially as we're transitioning to fully digital campaigns, everybody needs more money, more contributions for their campaigns to keep going. For example, now we need to pay more money for phone banking software, text banking software, stuff like that. So if all of our viewers could go to the candidate websites. So the four websites that you could go to are www.salmanrajput.com, SOLOMON, Rajput, RAJPUT.com. You can also go to Tomas Ramos's website, Tomas for Congress, TOMAS, tomasforcongress.com. You guys can also go to albertlee2020.com, as well as Ted. Ted Terry is running for commission in Georgia, and his website is TEDFORDEKALB.com. So if you guys,
you got it.
yeah, I spelled it out. So if you guys can go to the website and donate to all the candidates, that would be amazing. Also, we do think it's important to support grassroots organizations right now. So www.rentstrike2020.org. It's a national organization helping people really figure out what they're going to do when they can't pay their rent, their mortgages, their utility bills. So definitely go check it out, sign our petition. We have more than 2 million signatures nationwide in the last week alone. So definitely check that out. I kind of wanted to move on to a question we got on Facebook talking about some more local issues. So this is specifically for you, Ted. We have a question from Dan Paglia. He's asking, I've heard that smaller hospital systems are almost on the brink right now of collapse finance-wise and won't be able to pay healthcare workers. I suppose this is especially relevant for you, Ted, but what do all of you recommend for helping to keep hospitals functioning and viable during this time? And also making sure all healthcare workers like doctors and nurses have the equipment they need.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, our healthcare systems, our hospitals, especially our smaller hospitals and mostly rural hospitals actually, have been actually struggling for many years now. In Clarkston and DeKalb County, we're in Metro Atlanta, so we actually are really fortunate to have just a lot of really good, strong hospital options in the metro area. This is where the urban center is. But if you look at the rest of Georgia, in a state that has not expanded Medicaid, we're one of the southern states that has refused to do any Medicaid expansion. It has decimated whole communities where the hospital was the major employer, was the sort of the center of the community, and they're either folding or they're being merged into other larger conglomerates. And I think this is kind of, again, something that we talked about earlier about this really exposes the weaknesses in our society. And certainly in Georgia, we absolutely have to expand Medicaid. But I'm in the camp and pushing for Medicare for all, and not like the top issue here in Georgia, but even when you poll Democrats in Georgia, it's upwards of 60% support Medicare for all, 46% of independents, and even 15% of Republicans in Georgia polled support Medicare for all. And I imagine that some of those, and maybe most of those 15% Republicans, are coming from rural counties where they've seen their hospital systems completely disintegrate, and the level of care, the lack of an OBGYN in dozens and dozens of counties in Georgia, particularly out in the rural areas. And Georgia, actually, just to kind of get back to a theme we talked about earlier about environmental injustice, but Georgia and many counties in the South have a situation where there are many majority minority rural counties that don't have access to the broadband, don't have access to good health care, don't have access to the Medicaid. or other education opportunities. And so this is where we see really that dividing line between really a tale of two. Georgia's a tale of two Americas, and it's clear that that what we're talking about now is like that we have to support those hospital systems. And the question earlier, just I'll finish with this. The last question, or the first question, was about would you have voted for this bill? And I think the big issue that came up in my mind is, I think there was a lot of thought that there would be another bill right after that. To Solomon's point, basically saying like, this is not going to be enough. How can you go on recess? How can you take all this time, considering how long it took you to get this first one passed and the emergency that we're in? And so, I understand there's some support in the hospital systems in this current bill, but clearly it's not going to be enough if what we're hearing from the White House briefings is to be taken very seriously, that it's going to last, beyond April. And so absolutely, that's a really good point. That's, I think, one of our biggest vulnerabilities, at least here in Georgia, from what I've seen, the hospital systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Our hospital systems are really struggling. I also want to say that, right now, our healthcare workers like doctors and nurses, they don't have masks. They don't have protective gear at all. And these private for-profit healthcare systems, our hospitals, are not providing them. And I know right here in Michigan, when nurses speak out and say, I'm forced to work without a mask, they get fired. So, for all the candidates on this forum today, how would you deal with these for-profit companies who aren't giving masks, who aren't giving gloves, and the workers are essentially forced to fend for themselves? And when they speak out or when they organize, they get fired.
Well, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. For profit. So when you're talking about a for-profit institution, a lot of times they try to be as lean as possible, just in time for everything. So they're not carrying, stockpiles and reserves that are necessary. And I like to use the analogy when it goes to our banks. We came across various instances where the banks weren't carrying enough reserves. Glass-Steagall was a result of the Great Depression, where we had a combination of commercial and investment banks coming together and gambling on the stock market without having the sufficient reserves. We need reserves when it comes to our banks. We need reserves when it comes to our hospitals. Now, here's another thing. I mean, everything is interrelated. We spend trillions and trillions of dollars on our military. We have our military across the entire globe. Okay, we're in over 90 different countries, and guess what? We have military personnel that are doctors, that are nurses, that are paraprofessionals, that are allied health. We could be using those folks here in our country right now to help shore up the various hospitals and the needs that we have here today, instead of being across the globe, with our interventionist foreign policy, our imperialist foreign policy. We should be bringing all of our military back home and employing those folks here to help with the people here. I mean, that was, for instance, what the role of the National Guard was supposed to be. When you signed up for the National Guard, you weren't supposed to leave the borders of your state. But we have the National Guard. They're doing tours of duty in Afghanistan and Iraq. That was never the mandate. We need to bring these people back home. Now, as far as what we need to do right now today, I think we need to nationalize the hospitals right now. We are in crisis right now. Nationalize the hospitals, be able to organize it all so that we can push the product, the personnel, and to where we need it. We've got a serious demand in New York right now. We have less of a demand in North Dakota. Get the products and the personnel to where the needs are. And you can orchestrate that in any which way. Military would be a nice way to do it, because they're quick with command, quick with getting rapid deployment. But at this point, I really think that you should be nationalizing the hospitals at this point.
Absolutely. Does anyone else have anything to say on nationalizing hospitals or ensuring our workers have the equipment they need during this crisis?
Yeah. So I started an initiative about a month ago, Bronx Rising Initiative, and it's very simple. What I do is connect private money to hospitals. That's what I do. When you look at this crisis and you look at hospitals, when you look at clinics, the most crucial thing is having cash on hand. I have clinics right now that email me saying that they're going to have to close down some of their their health centers because they just don't have enough money just to continue operating. So I was lucky and fortunate enough that I was able to identify a couple private companies that were more than modest with their contributions, and I was able to secure over $3 million. I like to talk a lot about public-private partnerships because it's something that I'm kind of passionate about. We have to use the private industry more effectively. They have the money, they're making the money. Let's reach out to them, you know? And that's the thing, it's just like, we're always kind of fighting with the private public instead of at this time and point, they have money. Let's collaborate, let's talk. You know, Apple finally opened up their wallets. Elon Musk finally started talking. These people have access to capital like this, and they can get it into the hands of the hospitals right now. And that's what I did in my capacity as just a community organizer. I was able to secure funding, so they were able to expand ICU capacity, which is huge. And also, one of the companies has a Hong Kong office, so they were able to purchase N95 masks from Hong Kong and ship it out here. And I think it was close to over 100,000 N95 masks, and we were able to distribute it to different hospitals throughout New York City. So I look at it as if right now we have people that have money, we got to reach out to them, start holding them accountable now. You know, y'all made so much in profit. Come on, give back to our community. Give back to our hospitals that are in very need. Clinics are literally closing right now because they have lack of cash on hand. So that's my little spiel on that.
Amazing. You've definitely done a lot in your community, helping hospitals with money and stuff. That's amazing. Salman, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I absolutely do. We're supposed to be a first world country, right? You know, like America, it's supposed to be the biggest and the best. We're supposed to have we're the richest country that's ever existed in the history of mankind, right? Well, we're certainly not acting like it. We can't figure out how to make enough masks. Masks are not a hard thing to make. They're like little pieces of cloth, you know what I mean? Like, we're not asking to make like tanks and stuff. We just can't make enough masks to get to everyone in our country when we've had months of lead time before this got to the United States of America. I mean, here's the thing. We have a lot of technology. We have a lot of money in this country. We have a lot of power, but we're not using it at all because our leadership is completely bankrupt and also dumb as hell. Like, literally, Donald Trump does not believe in science. And that is the reason why he is going around and making and saying one thing one day, another thing the other day, saying that we're going to be done by the time that Easter rolls around. We're absolutely not. If we had a strong central government response to this, like we've seen in other countries, then we would not be the big country with the biggest amount of coronavirus cases in the world. We've seen how other countries have been able to handle the coronavirus pandemic, and it almost seems otherworldly to us. You know, they have a very coordinated response where they have many, many tests, and they're making sure everyone is getting the test and the treatment that they need, and nobody is having to pay for it, and it's all being taken care of the government. That almost seems like outlandish to us. And why is that? I mean, we're a rich country. Why can't we do that? We can't. We're a rich country. We need to start acting like it. If we had a sensible government that believed in science, took this seriously, and was able to coordinate a response while also using the Defense Production Act in mandates to create these very needed supplies that the members of the public as well as healthcare practitioners need, like masks, like PPE, like ventilators, we would be in a much different situation than we are today. I mean, the United States of America should be able to deal with this. It's just masks. It's just ventilators. Like, this is not crazy.
Well,
we should be able to handle this.
There's a very good answer for that. I hear you. It's just masks. But here's the answer. It's just capitalism. So here's the thing. The majority of our masks are made in China. The reason why the majority of our masks are made in China is because companies like 3M, these makers of masks, make them in the areas that have the lowest labor input so that they can increase the profits that they make. Now, here's the thing. We have a lot of laws on the books when it comes to where we're supposed to procure our materials when it comes to our military and where it comes to sensitive materials. And most of the times it says it needs to be made in the United States. Now they've gone around those rulings, those laws, those regulations to say, oh, maybe it's just a company that's based in the United States. What I'm saying is that we need to have some national reserves. We need to start manufacturing things and look at the total cost, okay? And the total cost is not just the labor inputs, but it is things like loss of intellectual property. It's things like the travel and how are you gonna get to the systems. We simply don't make masks here anymore. We don't make gloves here anymore. We import all of that stuff. And quite frankly, we should look at that again and take a look at how our government does its purchases, and to say, again, to revisit the regulations that we have on the books today and say, hey, maybe some of this stuff needs to be made in the United States again. You know, other countries like Germany, while they do import a good portion of their PPE from elsewhere, they still do actually make their PPE in Germany. So I think that's one part, is that we've allowed, you know, I heard you say endpoint capitalism. I said we are at peak capitalism right now, where we are focused on overproduction, overconsumption, and built-in obsolescence to the point where it's killing our environment and it's killing our people. We need to focus on trying to bring things back. And I think that one of the things that we need to look at is, hey, maybe we shouldn't be completely dependent on another country for our personal protective equipment. Maybe we shouldn't be completely dependent on another country for our energy resources, etc. So again, I think that we need to start looking at things like that. And then the second thing is those other countries, the culture of those other countries seem to be more collective as opposed to individualistic. And I think that we need to start acting and being more collective when it comes to things like this national crisis. We need to start thinking about our communities as a whole, as opposed to what we need and want and desire individually.
Absolutely. Now moving on to a question from Mary on Facebook. I think it's a question we can have all a little bit of fun with. It's a very simple question. Why is the DNC so anti-progressive? So anybody can answer. You guys have the floor. Please tell me, why is the DNC so anti-progressive?
Well, I'll just real quickly, I don't know if y'all knew this, but I am a DNC member. I was elected as the first vice chair of the state Democratic Party here in Georgia last year. And so I've only been to 2 DNC meetings. So, you know, I really can't answer that question because I honestly just haven't been around it long enough as like an official member. But I'm a progressive, and I ran for this position in the leadership role in our Georgia party. And, you know, as a result of that, you know, I'm also a DNC member. And, you know, one thing I will share is if you remember back during the August sort of period, there was a big push for a climate debate. But remembers that one. And the DNC was having this discussion of whether it's going to be a climate forum or an actual debate. And, you know, I mean, it was it's a committee, right? Democratic National Committee. So just think about any committee, you know, that anyone's ever been a part of, and there's bylaws and rules and process and, you know, and all these little, you know, pieces into which makes, you know, which is basically America when you think about it. I mean, you know, we have members from, I met a group, the Democrats Abroad group, which, you know, actually in their group the majority of delegates went to Bernie for the Democrats Abroad. But, you know, the DNC is as diverse as America is. And so, you know, I think like there's definitely, I would say maybe like less on the progressive kind of conservative thing and maybe more about sort of status quo and, you know, kind of disruption. And so there's definitely still that feeling of let's just kind of take things slowly. Don't rock the boat. Just take your time, young one, you know. That's all I'll say about that. I'll report back after I go to more DNC meetings.
Yeah, no, I'm a member. I'm a precinct committee member. I'm a state central committee delegate for the Democratic Party of Oregon. And I'm going to say something right now. And that is that same thing I said on Twitter before, Republicans, Democrats, there's 2 sides of the same ruling class. Okay. There are 2 sides of the same ruling class. Now, the Democratic National Committee, you hit the nail on the head, Ted, when you said that we are a party of a variety of folks. It should be a coalition, right? A coalition. But guess what? When it comes to the coalition, it seems like the Democratic Party is only about a coalition so long as the coalition sides with the establishment. And so right now, quite frankly, we have a large progressive minority within the party that is not aligned with the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is a center left, center party, right? And it's a part of a two-party duopoly. And quite frankly, I am for, and I am a proponent for having multiple parties. We need to have a system of ranked choice voting so that we can get to hear from a lot of different people, a lot of different ideas, because right now, doing the same thing ain't cutting it. Doing the same thing and expecting a different result ain't cutting it. We've got a Republican Party and a Democratic Party, and oftentimes it's hard to discern the difference between the two because they're both parties of the corporation, okay? And we need to have a party that's going to be a party of the people. We need a party that's going to actually care about the people. One of the problems, I mean, right now we're talking, the whole purpose of our conversation today is about bailing out the people. And the people that are in Congress right now decided that it was better to bail out the corporations than to take care of the people. So again, two sides of the same ruling class.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I mean, like you said, the same ruling class. Who controls the ruling class? In our country, it's the corporations because that's where they take their money. And so when we think about why they're anti-progressive, it's because they're being paid to be anti-progressive. I mean, the Democratic Party, the establishment, the corporate centrists that are running it, they really don't have very much of an ideology. It's just kind of like whatever, you know, and like, but it's kind of whatever the corporations tell them to do. And then the progressive left actually has an ideology that is focused around human rights for everyone, making sure that we catch up with the rest of the developed world so that everyone can live with the dignity and prosperity in our very rich and prosperous nation. But the reason why the DNC or the establishment or the Democratic Party, whatever you want to call it, is opposed to that is because it does not serve the interests of their corporate donors. And it's a very simple way to look at it. You know, I mean, a Medicare for All system is in all senses superior to the broken, fractured healthcare system that we have right now, where it's where we're paying double the amount of money to have worse healthcare outcomes than any other developed nation. Why don't we want to transition? Because of the interests of the private health insurance companies who are paying our politicians to lobby against it. Why do we not? Why are so many people in the Democratic Party who support climate change against the Green New Deal? Because many of them are still taking money from fossil fuel companies or have money invested in their own personal wealth invested in fossil fuel stocks. You know, there's just an abundance of reasons for why the status quo is favoring the corporate powers that be, and those powers that be are paying our ruling class to do nothing. So that, I think that's why they're anti-progressive.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. You both, all of y'all nailed it. It's literally, it's corporate. They're bought by corporations. Period. All right.
Long and short of it. Yeah, that summarizes what I was trying to say.
Everything you said is facts.
I'll add one thing in here because we had a situation at the 2016 convention. And I was a Bernie delegate, and there was a lot of this discussion about, well, you know, what do we do now, kind of thing. And I'm really grateful that because a lot of our Georgia Bernie delegation went back to Georgia and got more involved at their local Democratic committee level, which meant that they, you know, were able to get positions on the state committee, you know, the state Democratic committee. That, you know, when I ran for this position, you know, I, you know, won with the support of those new people. And so part of this is, you know, we have to have the mindset of, you know, I totally agree with Albert's, you know, let's have multiple parties. I think that actually would really mix things up a lot. And that would really create a lot of really interesting competition for the hearts and minds of Americans. I think it would up everyone's game, including the voting game. But I will say that, you know, just like people who sort of every state's different, but also just from in Georgia, I think there has been a benefit of us, trying to basically make sure that progressive voice is heard. And if we are relentless and we say that we want things changed, this is where you get platform changes at local, state conventions. It's where you get more people in the room at those DNC meetings. We're talking about a climate strike, where we almost had the votes to get the climate debate. So we almost had the votes to force a climate debate. We just were a little bit short. And so to me, that was indicative of the DNC from 2016 is much more progressive now.
The Democratic Party, why wasn't there a climate debate? It is supposed to be the party that's supposed to be for the environment. It's supposed to be the party that's supposed to be for protecting the planet. And we can't even get a debate because, again, the corporations are backing establishment candidates that take money from fossil fuel industry, that take money from things that want to continue to extract profit from these industries that are killing us and our planet. We got to get a hold of that. And I don't know if it is within the party or without the party, but it is still two sides of the same ruling class.
I just want to add something real quick to that conversation. So I'm running an open race. There's 10 candidates, a bunch of corporate Democrats. We have literally the vice chair of the DNC is running. We have one person that raised over $1 million, a few billionaires through him big fundraisers. So a lot of money into this race. This is my biggest pet peeve. So y'all have all these contacts, all these billionaires, all these multimillionaires, all these connections. There's a pandemic right now. You can't call them up and have those same corporations contribute money to the hospitals in our freaking district. Are you fucking kidding me? That's the stuff that drives me crazy. I'm like, you can call them so they can throw you a fundraiser so you can raise $500,000, but you can't call them to listen, our community's struggling right now. We don't have N95 masks. We don't have, PPE. We need to expand, ICU bed capacity. Why the hell haven't they done that shit? Why? Because they only give a fuck about themselves, not about the people. And that's a problem with corporations. If they cared about the people, they will be doing more right now in a pandemic that's going on. And the politicians that are bought out by them will be doing more as well. But that's the cycle that we keep on talking about. And that's the DNC for y'all.
Yep.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's move on to another fun question we got on Twitter from Kat. She asks, when all of you win your campaigns, what is the first fun thing you will do?
I got this one, guys. I'm going to Disney World. Just kidding. Yeah, I'm going to celebrate with my volunteers. We're building a huge grassroots army to go out there, a huge army of committed young people, actually, to go out there and talk to all the voters in our district. And if we win, it will literally be because of the power of the youth. That is the only reason we will win. And so me and all the other many young people who are part of our campaign are just all gonna go out and have a ball. You guys are all invited. It's gonna be great.
I love the framing of the question is, when you win, what is the fun thing you're gonna do? I can't remember when everyone's primary date is. We should all say that. My primary is on May 19th, and I don't have a Republican challenger. And so what I'm gonna do is celebrate the victory, but then get right to work, because in Georgia, we have 2 Senate seats up. You may have heard that one of our senators sold almost $20 million in stock.
Yes.
It's her and Kelly Loeffler, and then Richard Burr in North Carolina. The pandemic profiteers that hopefully can be defeated. And, it's just like Stacey Abrams is, one of our great leaders here in Georgia. And she's proven that Georgia is just a much more winnable state. So in DeKalb County, I actually, in my Super 6 district, 350,000 people, we have the vote numbers of people who are sort of the sporadic voters or first-time voters or haven't yet registered voters, where we have that 50,000 vote gap to try to, which is what Stacey Abrams lost by. She'd be the governor here saying that yes, coronavirus can be spread, by asymptomatic people, unlike our current governor. But I think
her vote was stolen. Sorry.
Yeah. But I'm always encouraging of especially in these progressive districts where where basically the race is a Democratic primary. I know, and some of y'all states, I know Michigan's more competitive. But you definitely got to support each other in terms of trying to get change up and down the ballots. And even if you don't have an election, necessarily for yourself in the general, maybe it's with a primary, find a local progressive or a higher progressive that you can support to get the vote out for them.
I'll say what I'll do. So my primary is June 23rd. June 24th, I'm taking a flight to Dominican Republic. My mom and dad live in Dominican Republic, so I just need to go spend time with some of my family and just chill out, because this running for office is crazy. I don't know why we all decided to do this shit. This shit is crazy. So I'm gonna need
We're crazy.
Just to get away and just chill out in DR. That's it.
Well, you're right. I mean, running for office is really a luxury for the ruling class. I mean, this was never meant or designed or built for regular everyday people to do. And we're doing it the right way. We're trying to do this by 100% being funded by the people, as opposed to taking the bribes from corporations and the wealthy. So that makes it even harder for me. I had to step down from being a dean in order to make this run. I work a shift job from 3 a.m. to 11 a.m. To help reduce the hemorrhaging that my personal finances are going through as I make this run. But our primary is May 19th, and when we win our primary, of course, we're going to celebrate with all of our volunteers. We have an incredible set of volunteers who have been dedicated and have given blood, sweat, and tears to this campaign. But the second thing we would do is we would start scouting out where we're going to put the local office, because right now the local office is way over to the wealthiest side of our district. It is nowhere near centered to where the district is. And I think it needs to be somewhere where it's more accessible to the people, and not with a whole bunch of security that you can't even go in to see your representative or the staff. So that's one of the things I think we're going to be looking at.
Amazing. And Solomon, do you want to say when your primary date is?
Oh yeah, ours is on August 4th.
Awesome, amazing. So let's move on. I was thinking we can start talking about labor rights. During this time of the coronavirus pandemic, there's so many workers who are deemed, essential workers, still being paid minimum wage, still going out there without hazard pay, without masks, without gloves. And now because of that, Whole Foods workers, Amazon workers, Instacart workers, they've all started unionizing and organizing and demanding their employers to treat them better. So if we can talk about right to work states, if we can talk about unions and labor rights, does anyone want to talk about that?
I can talk all day about it, but I want to give some space. I'll back up. You guys want to jump in, or I'll start? It doesn't matter to me. Okay. Yeah, I mean, so first of all, right to work is such a horrible name. I mean, it gives you the idea that that we're stopping people from working or whatever. One of the things that this coronavirus has done is it is emboldened people that are on the front lines, that are facing the incredible hazards, to go and say, hey, we need more security, we need more support, and we need hazard pay. And quite frankly, they do need hazard pay. It's a damn shame what Amazon has done to the organizers of that strike. Was that in New Jersey or New York? But seriously, people are starting to collect themselves and understand that there is strength in numbers, that you need to mass together to gang up to be able to defeat the bosses, if you will. We need to have to everything we can do to strengthen unions. We need to have that PRO Act in place. We need to make sure, because every single time you look throughout the history of this country, when union membership is strong, people are having more living wages. They're able to actually take care of their families. Nobody wants to be on the dole. Everybody wants to be able to lift up their heads and say, hey, I earned a hard living, I earned a good living here, and I can take care of my own. That's what unions do. They help to bring and build out living wages. They make sure that in our capitalist system, where the capitalist bosses extract the wealth from the people who actually produce it, that a little bit more of that comes to the people who actually produce the profits. So yeah, I mean, everything. I'm here in our state. We've seen the rise of the first fast food union with the Burgerville Workers Union. And I look forward to seeing more unions, fast food unions, rise up. We need to look at these people for what they are, decent contributing members of our community. They deserve to have living wages. They deserve to be able to feed their families from one 40-hour-a-week job. And when we're in office, I know we're going to be working together to strengthen unions. I know that we're going to be working together to ensure that we have living wages for all, because it doesn't make sense for far too many people struggling while we have a high concentration of wealth at the very top, well beyond the utility of that.
Absolutely. Does anyone else want to speak to labor rights and unionizing and organizing during this crisis?
I think that, yeah, like, I think that the assault on unions is a huge reason why we have had such a low minimum wage, why workplace conditions have deteriorated in this country, why people now have to work multiple jobs in order to be able to just exist. Like Albert was saying, one job should be enough, and it used to be. I mean, honestly, the things that used to exist in America just seem like so like outlandish to us. It just seems almost like fiction, or just, just like from a time that none of us can relate to. I mean, the fact that people were able to work a 40-hour-a-week minimum wage job and be able to like afford a home, like it just does not seem like in the realm of possibility in this moment, because we have moved so far away from that. And part of the reason why that's happened is because we had lower and lower, because we've been chipping away at unions for a long time. And it's because of unions that many of the things that we appreciate about our current society exist. I mean, the unions are what came up with the 40-hour work week, with the concept of a weekend, and like they believe that we should be working to live and not living to work. But because we've been chipping away at unions for quite some time in this country through various different laws like right to work, now we've become a country where you have to live to work. And if you're not working all the time, then the ruling class believes well, maybe you don't get the right to exist and be able to have a shelter and food. You might need to be working those the second job, the third job, because that is essentially what the individualistic mindset ends up producing, which is that it's your fault if you're not able to make it work for you. So I certainly believe that we need to strengthen unions, not just in this pandemic, but overall.
I want to touch on it's sort of a union, but more so in the small business aspect of things. In New York City, the minimum wage is, New York State, it is $15 an hour. When you have a small mom and pop shop, a small restaurant, and rent prices are going up and your overhead is just extreme. When I was a manager at a restaurant, we had to decide from paying our staff or paying Con Edison. We paid our staff. Then our Con Edison got cut literally in middle of service. This is a lot of things that our small business owners are going through before this pandemic, So this is something that we have to address in the federal level when we talk about federal subsidies for our small business owners that I believe, obviously everybody deserves a living wage, but when expenses are so high in a city like New York City, where rent is most of your cost and labor is your other half of your cost, we have to create better subsidies and helping our small business owners, because I completely see Amazon taking away jobs when it comes to retail. I see our food industry jobs when it comes to automation, McDonald's, kiosk, that stuff is already on its way out as well. So we really have to start looking at it in a holistic matter of how we're going to support our small business owners, where are we going as a society, and how we're going to provide those subsidies so we completely just don't, our small businesses completely just don't vanish, because that's what it's looking like, and that's a trend that is going to continue happening. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Now for all of us, regular working class Americans, or those who are not running for office, we're just those who are living in the community, what can we do to help people who are striking, people like Whole Foods workers who are on a strike? How do we help people organize? how do we help mutual aid funds and grassroots organizers actually organize during this crisis?
First of all, don't cross picket lines, right? Seriously. I mean, if it was you and you're looking for a living wage, I would hope that you would want the solidarity of your neighbors, your friends, your family members to be there in solidarity for you. Don't cross picket lines. So if we've got folks that are striking against Whole Foods, go shop somewhere else. You know, we need to have that solidarity. We need to make sure that everybody's taken care of, and that's kind of the whole point of all of our races. Is we're saying that, hey, we've spent too much time with a government that has been by and for the 1%, and it's time that we have a government that's of, by, and for the people. In order to do that, you need to have the solidarity of the people. We need your support as candidates here, as regular citizen representative candidates, but striking workers need your support as well. So, you know, don't buy from Amazon, don't buy from Whole Foods. Even if it's inconvenient, you know, your inconvenience is helping somebody else out. Okay, we need to make sure that all of us can take care of it, because we're one big community. I mean, that's what the United States is, right? We're one ginormous community, and we need to take care of all Americans.
Albert, it's tough because I listen. I order from Amazon all the time, and it's one of those things like they make it so easy for you, and that's a tough topic. And I agree with you. Yes, that's what you should, you know, have a stand and go along with it. But the convenience of having everything at your fingertips that you can literally order online, it can be at your house the next day, it's something that a lot of us progressives are hypocrites on. Let's be clear.
But here's the thing. I mean, that ordering it and getting it the next day is killing our environment, right? Individual trucks going out. You don't need something tomorrow. I mean, for most of the things you're ordering, you don't need it tomorrow, right?
But we want it tomorrow because we're Americans. You know, we want it right now.
Again, we need to stop thinking about this as individualists and looking for individualized solutions. I mean, when it comes to things like our Green New Deal, I mean, we have so many brilliant minds that are focusing on the next battery electric personal vehicle, when we should be thinking about the next battery electric bus, right? We need to think of collective solutions as opposed to individual solutions. We need to make, because quite frankly, more and more of the world is becoming wealthier. You know, you have a middle class that's growing in China, and guess what? They want to live like Americans. Now, if everybody lived like an American, we would need 25 planets. We don't have 25 planets, we got one, okay? And so in order to make sure that we are going to be able to have an existence for all of humanity, we're going to have to start looking more collectively.
Yeah, but that's a cultural thing as well, because we have to start literally thinking completely differently. High-speed rail. How the heck don't we have high-speed rail in the United States of America? Like, it blows my mind. You know,
again, because of money and politics, because we've got trucking institutions and the trucking industry that pays off our politicians to say that we need to throw all of our cargo through trucks. That's one of the most inefficient ways. It should all be on rail right now, just the diesel rail that we have. But if we had it on high-speed electric rail, it'd be even more efficient. Same thing with passenger jet service. You know, for most of the country, we can be connected on high-speed rail, reducing the use of incredibly wasteful jet fuel. And by rebuilding that infrastructure for high-speed rail across the country, we would be creating new jobs, green jobs, okay? And there'll be ancillary jobs, because guess what? For every person that's working on that rail, you're gonna need a food truck, right? Feed them for lunch. You're gonna need people that are gonna outfit these folks. This is the way you rebuild an economy. This is the way that you rebuild and revitalize our infrastructure and reinvest in America, is to think of those big projects, is to look at those big projects and say, hey, you know, things like what we got right now aren't working. We don't need millions of miles of highway across the world, across the country, so that we can drive dirty diesel trucks on it, when, you know, one train can carry as much as 300-400 trucks. You know, we've just got to think more collectively. We got to think about things that are more efficient. Hell, New York City is one of the most efficient cities in our planet. It's one of the most green, because you guys have a massive mass transit system. You have what do you call it? You have city blocks that are basically contained, where you have a bodega that takes care of the food. You have the restaurants, you have the movie theater, everything right there in one block. So you don't have to travel halfway across the city to get to what you need. So again, I think that we just need to start looking at things more holistically. What we got?
Yeah, let's move on to the topic of our workers right now in the healthcare industry who are fighting this. You know, the majority of them by far are women. Over 70% of our healthcare workers are women. You know, when you count doctors, nurses, EMTs, the majority are women. And now, you know, they're facing really hazardous situations. And also at home, when now schools are closed, they're only online education. Kids are being educated at home the majority of the time, you know, and right now in America, women are the ones who have to homeschool their children and cook and clean and also work from home if they need to. So in this pandemic, it's really highlighting the inequalities women face in our society. So the question we have here is, what sort of big structural change can we implement to help women's and close this gender gap in terms of how women are affected so differently when a crisis occurs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're right. I mean, I think about the people that I know that are in the healthcare industry right now. I know plenty of nurses and doctors that are women who, you know, do a lot of their professional work, have to go out to the hospitals, and then in turn, you know, we still are at this imbalance when it comes to housework, and that women by far do way more of the housework than men do. Number one, we need to ensure that we have equal pay for equal work, regardless of gender. That's a given. Number two, we need to figure out a way to compensate for domestic services, because that is work. It's work. Oh, we got Bob again. Okay, thanks, Tomas. That is work, and we need to make sure that work is compensated. Next, I think that we as men need to step up and start doing our fair share. Also, you got to call us out. Here's the other thing. One of the other things that this situation is calling or bringing to most people's attention is domestic violence. The rise of domestic violence. Okay, you know, for me, I was personally affected by domestic violence when I was in high school. My dad came back from the military. We had domestic violence in the household. It destabilized our house. We ended up homeless, and I was in battered women's shelters and homeless and youth shelters in 3 different states. Went to 5 high schools in 3 different states. Right now, we're seeing this situation throughout the world. In France, they've got 20,000 room nights for women that are affected by partner abuse. Here in our state, our governor, I think, has put down some money for hotel nights for, again, victims of domestic violence. And the far majority of the victims of domestic violence are women and children. And we need to seriously address those situations and get to tackling those problems, not only in this crisis, but in general. It just happens that during this crisis that these kind of things are starting to bubble up a little bit more.
I'll jump in real quick. Equal pay, that's 100, that's a given. But even taking it a step further, they should be getting double pay right now. In this pandemic, anybody that's working should be getting double pay. They're literally risking their lives, you know. With domestic violence, that's a big issue in my district, and obviously now even bigger. I look at it as when there's a domestic dispute, we have the police involved. I don't believe police should be involved with domestic disputes at all. They don't know how to handle these situations. They just want to arrest people and think this is how it's going to solve the problem. You're not solving any problem. You're only making it worse. Now there's an order protection. What does that mean? Oh, well, you know what? Your girlfriend was mad at you last night, but then tomorrow she's cool and she wants you to come back home, but there's an order of protection. Now you go back, now he gets rearrested. And now, you know what? You can't see your kids ever again. So it's just like, we need to really start restructuring how we're handling domestic disputes, you know, at large. It's like we don't need to be policing it. We need to create another entity where we have trained social workers, professionals, and have mediation. You know, like you shouldn't have to be going to court because of this domestic issue that's going on. There's a lot more psychological things, trauma that is going on in our homes, and it should not be addressed in courtrooms unless it's obviously violence and, you know, murder, and it's, you know, it's a different case. But we have to prevent that from happening in the first place. So if there's a dispute and you know there's things that are going on in that household, there has to be some kind of mediation, because there's a lot of, in my community, there's a lot of kids that are at risk losing their parents, their father, and then they can never see them again. I've dealt with so many different family issues, and we really just have to restructure the ways that we're handling these domestic issues, you know?
You're right. I mean, the whole thing with with having the police involved, you're right. It's the wrong tool for the situation. And quite frankly, I think that we need to take some of that funding away from our police departments and build out that social service when it comes to having counselors and the right kind of people, not only when it comes to domestic violence, but when it comes to our houseless situation and people that are affected with mental health issues. Because you're right, when the police are involved, that's that hammer that's looking for nails, right? And that can continue to further destabilize those families and lead to even more repercussions, negative externalities that come from the absence of a parent, the absence of an income, criminal records that prevent them from securing income to take care of the families, and it keeps going on and on and on. So again, yeah.
It's a cycle. That's a vicious cycle I keep on talking about. You arrest somebody, there's a domestic dispute. Now they're going to plead guilty to disorderly conduct. Now they have a record. Now they have an order of protection. Now they're on probation. That's systemic racism. So that's the stuff that at my community I'm faced with every single day. It's just, I hear it every day. I'm dealing with it every day. So we have to stop policing it. We really have to really start thinking taking a holistic approach on how we're going to really combat this issue, because it's a big issue, and it's only getting worse and worse, because that trickles down when a child experiences this trauma that's going on in their house, and the police come. That traumatic incident stays in the child's head forever. So now the child needs counseling and needs to see a social worker or you know. So yeah, we really need to take a different approach on domestic disputes and whatnot.
And I think also when we think about issues that affect women in this pandemic and at large in our society, we need to catch up with where the rest of the world is. I mean, we understand that the rest of the world understands that when a woman has a baby, she should have paid maternal leave. Like, that is something that, and it shouldn't just be for like a couple of weeks. I mean, she's just bonding with her newborn baby. It should be like a significant portion of time. Why is it that we insist on newborn or mothers who have just given birth to their baby to immediately come back to the workforce and not be able to have that special time with that child? In addition, many women struggle with having to make the decision of, am I going to work or am I going to have to pay for very, very expensive childcare that might actually cost more than my job, the income that I'm taking from my job? So if we have a universal childcare system, which we could easily achieve if we made the corporations pay their fair share and the 1% also pay their fair share, the wealthy pay their fair share, we could make sure that people don't have to confront that choice of whether they should go to work at a job that they are passionate about and interested in doing, or whether they need to stay at home because childcare is just way too expensive. It's out of reach for them.
I gotta put it for my group here. The Portland chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America has the universal preschool now. That's going to be on the ballot in November, and that's exactly it. Tax the rich to pay for a universal preschool, a no means based system that we make sure that all kids get universal preschool. Up now. Up now 2020.
Nice.
Absolutely, and that's something that I'm trying to push here in DeKalb County, because that is really the best. If you just look at it dollar for dollar in terms of our tax money, it is the best investment we can make in our society. It literally is. And so, when you talk about the things that we fund, whether it's war, defense, tax cuts for the wealthy, corporate welfare, then you say, well, what about just that pre-K and 3K, and then that out of school time, which is just so crucial to a lot of young people who, because of economic conditions, don't see their parents as much as they probably could if they had kind of the knowledge-based jobs that are the 9-to-5s. And so the reality is we have a lot of young people who, just if we're given just a little bit extra help, a little bit of extra attention, a little bit of extra support, would thrive and succeed, as well as their higher income zip code counterparts. And in like DeKalb County, that literally is just a 20-minute drive away, between huge disparities in life expectancy and incarceration rates. And this is just from one side of a metro county to the other, not across the country. It's around the corner.
So there's one policy point that I have that when I get to Congress, I'm going to introduce 1 year paid parental leave. Why is that important? That is literally the most important time of a mother, a parent, and their child, is the first years. Sweden already has it. Denmark already has it. All these countries already have, 1 year paid parental leave, and you can see how the quality of life for their children are just because of that. So then we build that pipeline after a year. All right, universal childcare. So now the parent can go back to work, put them in our universal childcare, but also in childcare, they're learning, that's my dog, I'm sorry. We're training and just teaching our children different things, because a lot of these childcare providers, they're not trained to do other things. And when I look at China, when I look at Japan, and you look at these children, they're learning at a young age. We should start, instead of 5 years old, pre-K and the kindergarten, we should start teaching our children at a younger age with universal childcare. So 1 year paid parental leave, and a lot of it should be subsidized through the federal government, because there's going to be companies that won't be able to pay that, especially if it's a small business. So the federal government should be able to subsidize it and give opportunity for parents to spend time with their children and their newborn.
That's the kind of big thinking that I'm talking about, right? Reinvesting in America doesn't just mean, dollars to infrastructure. It means investing in our individuals and our families, so that we can develop stronger bonds with our kids, so that we can get them the basic foundation of education necessary, so that they can become decent human beings and become productive members of society in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think also, we always talk about what these other European countries are doing, what Canada is doing, what Sweden, what Norway is doing, and they're always doing way more than us. And the thing is, I feel like we just need to keep going back to the point that we are the richest country in the world. We're the richest country that's ever existed. Why can't we do this? And people love to say, well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, we're going to pay for it using the vast wealth and resources of the richest country in the history of mankind. And when people love to ask, like, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? And then you tell them, like, okay, well, we're going to pay for it like how all these other countries pay for it. Well, we're going to make corporations pay their fair share. We're going to roll back the corporate tax breaks with those tax breaks that we gave that would have covered the elimination of all student debt in this country. We're going to, make corporations pay for their fair share. We're going to do all of that. We're going to have a wealth tax. But then people aren't satisfied. Like, they just don't believe that it can happen. And what I've come to believe is that when people ask that question, when people express skepticism about the fact that things could be different in our country, they are reflecting decades of propaganda that have been fed to them that tell us that this is the best that we can ever hope for, and there's nothing better that we can expect from our country and from our government. So what we're fighting, it's not just that we're fighting these like corporate overlords. It's not just that. We're fighting cynicism that has been sown into the minds of the American public to prevent them from believing that we can actually achieve what the rest of the world already has achieved. So I think that's what we need to remember, that we need to make people believe that this can happen. And I feel like the best way to do that is by just keep pointing at these other countries that have already done it. And they're like, what's so special about them? Like, why can't we be like that? Wouldn't that be great? I thought we were a developed country. I thought we were a first world country. I thought we were a rich country. We should be able to do that.
Absolutely. So we are about 10 minutes away from ending this town hall. I have one more question from Janaki on Twitter. She asks about all of your campaign strategies. So her specific question is, what are the top 2 things your campaign needs to do in order to win? And how do you appeal to people from all different sorts of demographics? For like specifically, how do you win votes from people like an 80-year-old African-American Catholic, or from a fundamentalist Christian, or from her hardworking landscaper friend who likes Trump? So why should all these different types of people support you, and how will your policies help them?
There's a lot in that question.
I'll go first. Well, for my congressional district, I'm actually the Lewis congressional district in the country, so I don't have to worry about any Trump supporters. I'll have to worry about the primary. But at the end of the day, we have different types of Latino, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans. We have a lot of Western Africans. So it's all about the people. It's literally the message is, we're not bought by corporations, we're progressives, and we're fighting for y'all. If you're all tired of the status quo, well, we're fighting against the status quo because we're gonna make the change that's necessary in our community. You all are struggling every day. You work in 2 jobs. Your quality of life is not where it should be. It's a new day. Not only in the Bronx, I always say in the Bronx, but in this country. This progressive movement is real. Our message is gonna get across to the working families, and they're gonna come out and they're gonna vote for the progressives that are actually gonna get the work done. You know, it's all about engaging and understanding what our families are going through. When I talk about I am the community, I am the community. I've lived those struggles every single day. I know what a single parent working 2 jobs, raising 4 children is like, because I was raised like that. I know what it is to have an incarcerated father and visiting them, etc. So I can relate, I can talk about the issues of my community we're faced with. When I get to Congress, I'm going to fight and advocate for the necessary changes that are needed. All of y'all, I'm so happy I met, y'all tonight and through this virtual digital town hall, because we're all different, but we're all the same. What are we? We're progressives, we're people, we care about community, and we're fighting to make a change. And whether we win or lose, I'm gonna fucking win. I know all y'all gonna win as well, but we gotta continue doing the work, period. It's about doing the work. And that's what people don't understand. I'm out here doing the work. Listen, I didn't know I was gonna get $3 million to my community, but what happened was I kept on doing the work and it came to me. So fight as hard as possible, no matter what. We're gonna get discouraged. I feel discouraged all the time, but I have hope and I have belief that no matter what, we're gonna get shit done, and people are gonna hop on board in this progressive movement. So that's what I got.
I'll just say real quickly, our election is on May 19th, and there's a big push for a vote by mail, and so just tactically for us, I don't know if by the time y'all's primaries roll around, if we're going to still be in this pandemic, but for now we're thinking that we might not actually have in-person voting, and so we're literally, ballots are being mailed out in Georgia as of like this coming Monday. And so for campaign tactics, every state's different, but in Georgia, we sort of generally know who has requested a ballot, who has a ballot kind of on their way. I know Oregon's all vote by mail, right, Albert? Everyone's been talking about how great Oregon is, because in Georgia we're like, hey, if we just all vote by mail, it'll be safer and healthier and more people will be involved. And look at Oregon, there's no voter fraud in Oregon, but of course the Republicans here in Georgia are saying that the Democrats will somehow use vote by mail to commit fraud, which that's like the most secure way to vote. It's a hand-marked paper ballot, and it's a signature, and everything has to match up. It's it's actually kind of it's a little bit more difficult in Georgia, but you can vote by mail. So we're chasing ballots sort of every single day. If we know folks have been requesting ballots, we're trying to call them as soon as possible, send them handwritten postcards, and try to put that personal touch on it before they return their ballot. And I think particularly for these congressional primaries, like getting that personal touch from the campaigns is huge, right as they're kind of thinking about who they're voting for. And and then the final thing about just sort of what do you do with a broad community, a diverse community. I spent 3 years as the director of Georgia Sierra Club, and one of the things that we were really emphasizing at the time of my leadership at the Georgia Sierra Club was based on the Jemez principles of democratic organizing. If you haven't heard of the Jemez principles, definitely just Google it. There's a one-page PDF on ejnet.org. And it's 6 principles. And number 1, be inclusive. Number 2, emphasize on bottom-up organizing. Number 3, let people speak for themselves. Number 4, work together in solidarity and mutuality. Number 5, build just relationships amongst ourselves. And then number 6, commitment to self-transformation. And I think to me, the commitment to self-transformation is so important, because if we are willing to, as Albert kind of alluded to it earlier, but instead get ourselves out of the mode of individualism and instead into community-centeredness and walk our talk. And that as we lead by example, that the values that we're struggling for, we show that we are justice, that we are peace, that we are the community, and lead by example. And particularly when it comes to a community as diverse as the one that I have in Clarkston here, as well as DeKalb County, and it's diverse as many of your communities as well. But we have to make sure that people can be held up, and that they see our solidarity, and they see us also standing with them, and not telling someone what to do, but leading by example. And I think what I see here today has really been really awesome to hear about all of y'all's campaigns and your principles and your ideas, because what I see is us trying to lead by example, and having that kind of paradigm of like when we're all working together, that when the work is done, people don't say that the leader got it done for us, but instead that we all did it, or we did it all by ourselves. And we want people to feel like that they're the leaders that they've been waiting for, in summation. So thank you all very much. Great to see you.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Ted. So for us, the most important thing that our campaign is doing right now is building a huge army of committed young people to talk to all the voters in our district. So we are doing something kind of different. We have a huge internship and fellowship program, and we've actually been able to convert all of it to be completely remote. So if you're watching, if you're from anywhere across the United States of America, please go to salmonrajput.com, SOLOMONRAJPUT.com. Fill out our application to intern. It only takes 30 seconds, and I personally interview every single person that wants to become an intern or a fellow on our campaign. So it's young people taking over the world here, and I'm really excited to be part of a campaign like this. Our campaign is actually exclusively, like completely youth-led. Just by chance. I'm actually the second oldest person on our campaign. It's mostly run by high school and college students. So it's a really cool, it's a really, we've got a ton of people. It's a great campaign to be part of. And I just want to conclude with this. I want to say that nothing that we're asking for is radical. The radical thing here is the status quo, because we're just, like I've been saying throughout this whole town hall, we're just trying to play catch up with the rest of the world. The radical stance is to insist that we can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
That we're too uniquely incompetent or incapable or dysfunctional or backwards to get this done. The radical thing is the status quo, and it's barbaric. And I think at this point, we're done waiting on our politicians who keep making excuses for why we can't do what the rest of the world already has done. So if you want to join our campaign, if you want to join this journey, if you want to donate to our campaign, please go to SolomonRajput.com. And let's do this thing together. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, so for our campaign, we focus on all of the people of the 3rd District. We're not just here for the Democrats. We're not just here for independents. We're here for everyone. So we've had very great, wonderful conversations with Republicans, with independents, with non-affiliated voters and the like. And you know, from my perspective, a representative of the district is supposed to be a representative of all the people. Now, you're not necessarily going to agree with everything. Hell, I don't agree with everything with my wife, so I can't expect to agree with everything with every single constituent of the 3rd district. But that's what we've been doing before the COVID crisis. Now, after the COVID crisis, we're doing the same thing, except we're trying to do it virtually. We're also trying to build coalition. We're trying to meet up with candidates from across the country, like today, listening to basically the same message, which is that we need a government that works for all of us and not just those at the very top. I think that's what it comes to when you look at the hundreds of progressives that are running for Congress across the country, when you're looking at the thousands of progressives that are running for local and county and state level positions, is that we're fed up. We're tired of having a ruling class. We're tired of saying that you know, things are not we're not capable of doing things. You know, like Solomon said, it's barbaric. It is barbaric to continue to do business as usual, allow people to suffer when we have the means, the capability to actually accomplish the things that are necessary and good for the entire community. So you can look at, for more information about our campaign, you can go to albertlee2020.com. Like all of the rest of the campaigns here, we're 100% funded by the people. And we intend to stay that way for the duration of our campaign, as well as the duration of our position, because this is the thing. We want to represent the people. It's not about corporations, it's about the people. So again, albertlee2020.com, you can go there to sign up to volunteer, and we would love your help. Thank you.
And Tomas and then Ted, if you guys want to talk about your website and how to join your campaign, that'd be great.
Yeah, tomasforcongress.com. We right now, just like everybody else, we're just doing digital. We'll be doing phone banking, texting. But yeah, just reach out, tomasforcongress.com. You can see my platform, everything that I'm about. And just like everybody else, this is powered by the people, grassroots. We're still in this. I made the ballot, I found out a couple weeks ago. So my name will be there June 23rd. Tomas Ramos will freaking be there. You know, it's an exciting feeling, to be honest with you. I would have never thought I'd be doing this, but I'm running for y'all. You know, I'm not running because I want to be a politician. I'm running because I want to continue serving the public in a higher capacity where we can actually make systemic change, which is Congress. So thank y'all.
That's awesome, Tomas. I forgot that you guys have to take signatures to get on the ballots up there. We just got to throw down a couple grand down here in Georgia to get on the ballot here. But yeah, I appreciate that. That last little plug there. So my website's tedfordecab.com, and our election's on May 19th. We are right now chasing voters who have ballots, you know, potentially on the way in the mail. An average of a couple thousand right now, sort of a night, are kind of being uploaded. So our big need right now is just to get folks to do a couple of hours of you know, a phone bank shift. We've already identified thousands of supporters. We're just trying to make sure that they're you know, that they will in fact return that ballot, and then just kind of go on to the next voter. So definitely want help with anyone who can do a little bit of phone banking, easy get out the vote calls, and yeah, tedfordecab.com, click on the volunteer button, you can sign up there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for everyone on this town hall today, and thank you so much for all of our viewers. The questions we got today were amazing. I really appreciate just how involved everyone is in making sure working class Americans get through this crisis without, you know, so much debt and losing their jobs. It's really encouraging. To all our viewers, I really ask everyone to go to the candidates' websites, donate, sign up to intern, sign up to volunteer, phone bank, text bank. You know, everything might be remote, but that doesn't mean, you know, our grassroots organizing has to stop. So definitely donate. You know, phone banking and text banking costs money. Paying staff costs money. So definitely go to everyone's websites, donate, sign up to organize. And thank you everybody for joining. This was amazing, an amazing 2 hours.
Woohoo! Thank you guys.